want to welcome Professor Pierre Sauvage, and thank you very much for collaborating with our newspaper. In 2 years, we'll have to decide where we want to direct our careers. What was your situation like when you decided to study chemistry?
In the French system, you have, have you heard of the baccalaureate? Baccalaureate is the examination at the age of 18, when you finish high school, before you enter the university or high school. And in the French system, you have two parallel systems, so to say. One which is the university, so you can start at the university at the age of 19 or so. Or you can go to some special structures for entering engineering schools. And engineering schools are perhaps more difficult to get in, but you become an engineer. And so that was my choice, to become an engineer, and an engineer in chemistry, very simply. And then I liked it, and I wanted to do my PhD, my PhD thesis in a good laboratory. And that was it. That's what I did, very simply.
In 2016, you received a Nobel Prize for your development of molecular machines. Can you explain in a simple way how these structures work?
The structure, it's difficult, without slides, because the structures are relatively complicated. I can explain perhaps the functions of these molecules. Very simply, chemists have made thousands and thousands of molecules. And there are very simple molecules, let's say benzene. Have you heard of benzene? Benzene, it's a hexagon, a very simple molecule. Methanol, CH3OH, very, very simple molecules. But there are also very complex molecules. And chemists have made more and more complex molecules. But these molecules are motionless. They don't move. They distort, they vibrate, but they don't move, really. And so chemists thought that it was a challenge to make molecules which can be set in motion, which you can move at will in a strictly controlled fashion. And this brings us to biology, because in biology you have many, many molecules which undergo motion, but they undergo motion in a very controlled fashion. They do not move at random. They move specifically in a certain way, like the first video you showed, the rotary motor, but there are many, many others, molecules which can walk, really, molecules which can walk on rails, molecules which can contract or expand. And so chemists never made such molecules before. And we and some other people, we thought that it was time for chemists to make molecules which can be set in motion in a very controlled fashion. And this is how we started, making something which is similar to a rotary motor, to a linear motor, like a piston moving in a cylinder, etc.
How did this discovery change the course of your career?
I didn't ask myself the question. We were having fun. We were very happy of what we were doing, and the most exciting part of the work was simply the scientific success. The career was kind of something automatic, and so we were having fun, being successful, making new systems, making new molecular machines. And the career followed, of course.
Do you follow any routine that has helped you reach your goals?
I had some pastime, but a bit gardening or music. But my main pastime was chemistry. Reading chemistry and discussing chemistry. It's very important to read a lot. The more you learn, you have to absorb knowledge permanently. And the more you learn, the more imaginative you can be. Because your imagination will be built on what you learned, what you incorporated in your brain. So reading was a pastime.
Science is getting more specific and its scope is narrower in most disciplines. How has this affected the way people do research?
Yeah, this is a very, very good point. I think during the 19th century, a scientist could know almost everything. And it gradually changed. And when I was young, when I was a PhD student, I was very proud because I could read more or less all the literature, at least in my field. I could read maybe 30 journals, 30. I used to do that on Saturday morning. Every Saturday I was reading, and that was great. And I was not the only one. Many people were doing that. And nowadays it is totally impossible to read more than 1% of the chemical literature, which you should read. 1%, it's already a good proportion. So things have completely changed. And in a way it's bad, because it is much more difficult to work at the borderline between fields. You have disciplines, and in former times you could be kind of multidisciplinary in terms of research projects and even your own culture, and nowadays it is extremely difficult. Some people say that nowadays you know everything of nothing in terms of field. It is so narrow. And in former times it was very different.
In the past years, new countries have joined the global scientific community. What do you think we can learn from the United States, or more recently from the Japanese and the Chinese systems?
Yeah, it's a good point. Europe is doing well. It's doing really great, even in many aspects. And so we can learn from the US, we can learn from China, but it goes both ways. I think the US and China can also learn from Europe. I think the way we have organized research at the European level is really nice by, in a way, pushing or almost forcing scientists of various countries to work together by creating networks. This is, of course, very, very beneficial. So mixing scientists from various European countries. But from the US, for the moment, I'm not sure we can learn much. From China, we can learn enthusiasm. I've been in China regularly, maybe twice a year or so. And in China, the young people are extremely enthusiastic about science. They all want to interact with, let's say, more experienced scientists. And they have a, full confidence in science. They are not critical. And this is, in a way, very rewarding to give lectures in China, because you feel a lot of enthusiasm. So we can learn perhaps a little bit more enthusiasm from the young Chinese people. But many European countries are also very enthusiastic. Look at you, so you are very enthusiastic.
In an interview, you said that to study philosophy in France, it was required to do a chemistry exam first. How important do you think philosophy is and should be in science?
Philosophy is a very important field of activity. My wife is a philosopher, so this is why I have been influenced. I think it helps you be serene, quiet, not too nervous. And you ask yourself some very important questions about your life, about the other's life, about the world, about the future. In a way, it broadens, it widens very significantly your way of thinking.
How relevant do you think public awareness of science is nowadays, especially among young people? Which role should it play?
I will answer, by simply quoting one of my best friends, Fraser Stoddart, who is a co-laureate and who is a very, very close friend. And we were in Italy last week, in Bologna, for a meeting, big meeting. There were several events, and Ben Feringa, the third laureate, was also there. And we were interviewed. There was a talk show. There were several interviews. And Fraser Stoddart made a point which I find important. There are very important people, in the world, politicians, financial deciders, journalists. And I'm sorry to say, but these people are sometimes totally outside the scientific sphere, or let's put it more directly. They know nothing in science. They have no background. And it's terrible. I believe that if you want to have power, if you want to participate in the organization of the society, you should know a bit of science. You shouldn't be an expert, of course, but you should be able to talk to scientists to some extent. And the same is true for the people who are very powerful, journalists. Journalists, they can make the opinion, and I respect that, but sometimes they say things which I find almost shocking because they know very little science. And so my hope for the future is that those important people, the people who have power, get more interested in science and communicate more with scientists.
Mass media and social networks are an important tool in the 21st century. How do you think they should be used in order to bring your discoveries closer to the general public? Or are they an obstacle for this?
That's a very delicate question. I'm not a fan of social networks. I can understand that for young people it's very important. There is a danger. Maybe some young people, pick up their information from social networks and nothing but social networks. The source of information, the news, so to say, being only in, social networks. I mean, I'm not going to refer to anyone. It's a pity if they do not try to go a little bit further and read the press, written news are sometimes very interesting. Radio, television, although television is not perfect, but I think, being satisfied with the information you receive from your social network is not enough. I think you should try to improve that.
Young people are subjected to much pressure when they're trying to find their career. What advice would you give someone to help them make the right choice?
This is a very difficult question. I don't think I can give you a satisfactory answer. In science, mostly in science. It is certainly perhaps not easy, but not too difficult to find a position to get a job, if you have a degree in science, even if it's not exactly in the same field as the one you studied. So doing science is certainly a good solution. It's relatively, you can feel relatively safe that with a degree in a given science, a good degree, you will get a position, a job. That's all I can say. But things, have changed again. When I was young, it was much easier to get a position in basically in any field than it is today for the same young people, so to say.
You have been investigating and developing projects for a very long time. While that happened, a lot of things have changed. What changed the most, and how has this affected the way research is done?
Yeah. So I have led a research group between 1980 and 2015 or 16. I stopped supervising people after the Nobel Prize. Anyway, I was so busy, there was no way that I could supervise people. Things have changed, not dramatically. In the 80s, you also had to fight for money. It was not as difficult as it is nowadays, but you also had to write up proposals to try and convince financial deciders that what you were going to do was of interest for the society. One of the big changes is that nowadays in Europe, you have to rely on European money to some extent, at least. And so there are European programs. So you have to apply in Brussels to get money, European money. There is a weak point. It is so selective that you may wonder whether it's really useful. But it is useful. Simply, I think Europe should put more money in big research programs for Europeans, and perhaps give less money for those who are successful, but give more money overall and award, let's say, a larger number of scientists. But a dramatic change, you cannot say that between the beginning of the 80s and nowadays. It's not so different.
Women are fighting for equal rights and recognition in their fields. This revolution has affected the different scientific fields. How have you noticed this change in your field?
Well, I think I already answered this question before, that when I was young, there were very few girls in doing science. When I was a student, there were... Is it your question? Or? Yeah. There were very few girls. Maybe 10, 20% at most. And nowadays, I don't know how it is in Spain, but nowadays in France, it's almost 50-50.
It is every scientist's dream to find a cure for cancer. How do you think your findings will help in this field in the future?
Yeah, so this is now medicine. Curing cancer is medicine. I will take this opportunity to tell you a story. May I? A small story, a scientific story, to show that accidents can have very happy consequences. And there is a very nice word in English, which is serendipity. Serendipity means discovery by accident. And discovery by accident happens, from time to time, quite regularly. And there is one which was extremely important. I mean, it's going to take me 2 minutes, if you allow me, 2 minutes. There was a medical, no, not a medical, a biologist in the 60s who was very intrigued by something, cell division, cell division. And he was wondering whether cell division would be modified if the cells were placed in an electric field. So he took bacteria, Escherichia coli, or Escherichia coli in English. This is the most common bacterium, really very, very common. And he cultivated, those bacteria, Escherichia coli, between 2 platinum plates, which are called electrodes. Have you heard of electrodes? Yeah, like a battery, and so he cultivated those bacteria. And when he was applying a potential between these 2 electrodes, which were made out of platinum, which was a classical material for electrodes, he noticed that the bacteria were not dividing anymore. They were not reproducing, and so the number of bacteria was stable. So they stopped dividing. And he was very intrigued. And he concluded that bacteria in an electric field stop dividing. There is no cell division anymore. Great. So the people were somewhat intrigued, and they worked to understand what was going on. And what was going on was totally different. There was a little bit of platinum of the electrodes, which was dissolving in the mixture and giving a molecule. And there was a molecule with platinum. And this molecule had a very strange effect. Cell division was completely inhibited by this molecule. And this molecule was known, but they didn't know at that time. It was called cisplatin. And they thought, well, it's interesting, if we can stop cell division with bacteria, we should try with cancer cells. And so they took a mouse, and those mice, they implanted cancers, sarcoma in the cell, in the mice, and they repeated the same experiments, injecting now the platinum molecule, cisplatin, in the cell, in the mice. And the tumor disappeared after a few days, a few weeks, and it didn't come back. And so that was a big thing. And they thought, so we found something, totally by accident, which suppresses cancer tumors. And that was the beginning of a revolution, which started in 1972, 73. So this molecule, cisplatin, was allowed to be used against cancer, and it changed dramatically the situation. Before 73, 74, the people suffering from testicular cancer, the men having testicular cancer, had a very bad prognostic. Basically, they were dead within 1 or 2 years. And after this, testicular cancer was cured with a rate of 95%. So today, thanks to this accident, in a way, testicular cancer is cured very, very easily. And these molecules has been used, it is still used. There is a large family of molecules, very similar to this one, which are used for various types of cancer, breast cancer, liver cancer, etc. And so all that from an accident, somebody who had a strange idea of looking at the effect of an electric field on cell division, and it led to an extremely important application.
What are the future challenges of scientific research? How do you see your field in 25 or 50 years' time?
Wow, that's it's more for a prophet than for a scientist. In my field, I can talk about my field, perhaps. In my field, more and more sophisticated molecular machines will be made, and in particular, molecular machines which will be biocompatible, which will be injected in organisms, in bodies, and maybe travel in fluids and destroy bacteria, malignant cells, things like that. That's one of the targets, for many people. But generally speaking, it's very, very difficult to say, where science will go and what it will be like in 15 years' time.
Thank you for collaborating with our newspaper.
Thank you.